Deadass, close your eyes for just a second and imagine teleporting straight back to the Middle Ages. I know exactly what you're probably picturing right now. Shining armor, brave knights, majestic castles, maybe a grand royal feast, right? Well, in this explainer, we're going to completely shatter those Hollywood illusions. It's time to look at the cold, hard, and incredibly muddy truth of human history.
Because here is the brutal reality. Do you honestly think you'd be royalty? Statistically speaking, absolutely not. You are waking up as a peasant, basically an NPC in a system that does not care about you. Your Grand Royal Palace? It's a single-room house. The floor is literal dirt. Every single time anyone takes a step, dust fills the air, and you're breathing that in all day. Biting insects are everywhere. It's a rude awakening, to say the least.
Section 1. The Medieval Dream Home, a Claustrophobic Reality.
Okay, let's dive into this. Your dirt floor hut has absolutely no glass windows, just these uneven wooden shutters that let in the freezing cold. And you are definitely not living alone. You share this incredibly claustrophobic space with a bunch of unpaying roommates. We're talking chickens, goats, maybe a pig, and literally thousands of lice and fleas living right in your bed. And speaking of your bed, you sleep on straw stuffed into a cloth bag. There is zero main character energy here, just zero privacy. You're crammed in with your parents, siblings, children, and even that one uncle who showed up 2 years ago for a weekend and just never left.
And before the workday even begins, you are hit with this horrific morning scent. Imagine the toxic blend of wet dog, sweaty armpit, rotten milk, and burned wood. Why burned wood? Well, most peasant houses had an open fire burning right inside the room just so it didn't turn into a human popsicle. But they didn't have a proper chimney, so toxic smoke just filled the space, stinging your eyes and coating your lungs day after miserable day. You'd basically have the lungs of a 50-year smoker by the time you were 10.
Section 2. A Diet of Hardship. Breakfast in the Mud.
So, you wake up, your stomach is growling, and it's time for breakfast. Meet your main meal, pottage. Imagine a perpetual stew that has literally been boiling since your great-great-grandfather was alive. They never make a new batch. They just toss more random grains, roots, vegetables, or even pebbles into the old pot. Now, what's really interesting about this is that the stew is older than most of the people in the room. And your spoon? Just a stick carved with the exact same knife the village used yesterday to castrate a goat.
Alongside your ancient stew, you get some bread. But listen, this is not a soft, warm brioche. This is basically a medieval weapon. It was made of cheap flour mixed with sawdust, bark, or powdered grass. It was so rock hard it could genuinely crack a skull, and you had to soak it in your pottage just so your teeth stood a chance. It's a total loss of flavor. Worse yet, the rye flour was often infected with ergot fungus, which could cause terrifying hallucinations, gangrene, or, extreme cases of death.
To wash down your sawdust bread, you're drinking small beer. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth is everyone, even the little kids, drinking beer for breakfast? Because the drinking water was basically liquid poison that would kill you faster than a sword. The rivers were completely full of parasites and animal waste. Brewing small beer involved boiling and fermenting the liquid, which was the only way to kill off the lethal bacteria. It had very low alcohol, sure, but it means the entire population was low-key buzzed 24/7 just to stay alive.
Section 3. Streets of Sludge. Biological Consequences.
Suddenly, a deep, twisting pain hits you from the inside. That ancient, glitchy stew is not sitting right, and you need a bathroom, like immediately. You only have two options here, and they are both absolute nightmares. Option 1 is the family bucket right inside the house. Everyone is watching, your parents, the uncle, even the goat. It's an entirely public and deeply humiliating affair. Or, Option 2, you go outside and dump your waste straight onto the street, right onto your neighbors. A spectacular lose-lose situation. If you chose Option 2, you might hear someone yell, "Gardilou." It's a warning derived from French meaning, watch out for the water. But trust me, it was not water. People were pouring their waste straight out of their windows. This created a brown, bubbling river of human waste, animal dung, rotting food, and dead rats flowing right down the middle of the street. And the absolute worst part? It flowed downhill directly into the exact same river the town used for their drinking water.
This number right here, 500, is truly staggering. To put that into perspective, it took humanity another 500 years to connect the dots and realize that this horribly contaminated water was the direct cause of dysentery, typhoid, and all these other waterborne diseases. This brutal lack of sanitation turned medieval cities into absolute death traps. quietly killing tens of millions of people across Europe while they just walked around thinking feeling constantly sick was somehow normal.
Section 4. Doctors and leeches. Medieval medicine.
So your stomach is still in absolute agony from the pottage. You need medical attention. But real doctors, those were strictly reserved for kings and bishops. You, the lowly peasant, get the village multitasker. This guy cuts hair, sharpens knives, pulls teeth, drains blood, and brews beer. He does not wear gloves, he definitely does not wash his hands. In fact, he is probably brewing his beer in the exact same bucket he uses for amputations. Think about that for a second.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute flaw of medieval science. Your village multitasker doesn't ask for your symptoms or run tests. He relies on the 4 humors. He just assumes your sickness is an imbalance of 4 magical fluids believed to control health: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. It was a completely unfounded medical philosophy that dictated exactly how he was going to magically cure you.
His brilliant solution? Drain you like a water barrel. He grabs a rusty blade that looks like a butter knife and just opens a vein. After a bloodletting session, you had a 50% chance of just passing out right there in the mud from blood loss. And if the rusty blade didn't work, well, he'd bring out the leeches, which were conveniently stored in a jar of someone's old bathwater. 10 out of 10, valid therapy, right? True medical innovation.
Section 5. The Witch Trials. Paranoia takes over.
If the rusty blades and the bathwater leeches failed to cure you, things took a much darker turn. When people couldn't explain sickness or a bad harvest, they looked for a scapegoat. Getting labeled a witch was terrifyingly easy. Knowing a little too much about wild herbs? Witch. Looking a bit too confident while boiling your soup? Oh, definitely a witch. One neighbor holding a grudge was enough to start a rumor that became a literal death sentence. And if you denied it, they viewed your denial as absolute proof of your guilt. A total logic glitch. Which leads us to the horrifying lack of logic in medieval justice: the trial by ordeal. The process guarantees a tragic end. First, you are tied up and thrown into a river. If you sink, hey, congratulations, God has decided you're innocent. But unfortunately, you drown. If you magically float, you are deemed guilty and they execute you anyway. It was a test designed so that you lose your life no matter the outcome. A permanent system failure.
Despite the freezing mud, the perpetual pottage, the sawdust bread, the sludge rivers, the leeches, and the constant threat of a trial by ordeal, this wasn't rare. This was just daily life. Yet somehow your ancestors endured decades of this absolute misery so that you could be alive today. It really is appropriate to say, thank you, medieval grandpa. Which brings us to our final question. We complain about slow Wi-Fi connections or a bad cup of coffee today. But knowing what they sacrificed and the sheer horrors they endured just to survive, could you survive a single day in their dirt-covered shoes? Think about that the next time you turn on a hot shower or pour yourself a glass of clean water. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.